Hey, what is up, guys? So I want to do a video today on my Medfords that I use. And out of my entire knife collection, the Medfords still garner quite a bit of attention. I still get quite a bit of correspondence asking questions and asking for advice, and I try to do my best, but I thought it'd be a good time now to make a video regarding my experiences and the things that I've kind of observed while using these knives. I started collecting Medfords probably back in 2016, and I probably bought my last Medford, I would say, about 9-10 months ago. So all of these knives here range in my collection anywhere between 1 and 2 years. They all get used pretty heavily, and we'll talk about them individually. And I'm actually going to give them a kind of a grade and my thoughts on them based on my preferences. Things we're going to look at on each knife are, number one, did it have any warranty or any issues? Or are these knives still under warranty? Number two, we'll talk about the steel. I know that was a big question mark that a lot of people had, and you'll see that I've used both or all of D2, S35VN, and 3V. All of the knives you see here have been used. They have been sharpened, and I'll talk about that. The next are going to be the actions. We'll talk about what the action was like when I first got it, and we'll talk about what the action's like now. We'll talk about the ergonomics and what I thought that they were going to be and what they ended up being. And for the last part, we are going to talk about how the knife performed in kind of everyday duty, and therefore did it end up getting a lot of pocket time, more than I suspected it would or less than I suspected it would. So again, we're going to grade these things A, B, C, D, and I suppose F. None of them actually failed, but I suppose you could give them that grade. So we'll just start from left to right and roll through them. Okay, so the Micra Praetorian right here that you see, I actually thought that this was going to be an extremely used knife, and it turns out that I use this one the least. If you're looking for a Medford, kind of, that they've really made a name for themselves and overbuilt thick, heavy knives, and this was kind of one of their latest or their answers to people who were looking for the design because they really enjoyed the design, but wanted something smaller to put in their pocket. And in fact, that's why I purchased this knife as well. The person who sold me the knife, really, the dealer, Dan Delavan at Plaza Cutlery, they're no longer there, he used one every day, and he really liked this size. But for me, I'm going to go ahead and tell you it is one of the least used knives in the collection. It's kind of got a weird size thing to it. At first, I always just reached for the bigger Medfords. And then, there was some times where I needed something small for like a suit carry. And at the end of the day, this knife was just kind of in between. I mean, it was not necessarily thin or light enough to go into a suit, and it was just too small to hang out in my pocket for my preference, especially when I wanted to carry and use a Medford. So this knife you're looking at here, has a D2 blade, has a Sandy Shoals design on it, has the newer pocket clip, and as I said, I have sharpened this. This knife here is not under warranty. So let me just say that. I opened it. It is not the fault of the knife. I actually took it to the beach, and it went into the ocean. So I decided when I got home that I was going to pop it open and clean it out. I didn't want to bother Greg with it. I know that it would void the warranty, but it was either that or, I thought about just rinsing it off and putting soap and water, but salt water, the ocean, is just so corrosive, and with the D2, I just decided that I was just going to take my licks, open it up, and clean it out, and put it back together. So the knife itself had no issues. It hasn't had any issues, but this particular knife is no longer under warranty. All right, so let's talk about the action. I find the micros extremely easy to articulate. So if you have problems flicking open a full size, you are probably not going to have any problems with the Micro. That being said, this particular knife's action never broke in. It was probably one of the only Medfords, that's a spoiler for the other ones coming up, that literally never got glass-like and never got really droppy. It's still pretty much the same action from the day I got it, and that might have a little bit to do with taking apart and cleaning it, but it got a little bit smoother after I did that, but it just never got glassy, and of course it's still rock solid. And it doesn't, and I don't know if this is unique to this knife only, it really doesn't have the loud Medford click that you get with all the other Medfords. It's there. It's just miniaturized like the knife. So I would give this knife a C. As far as ergonomics go, it's actually quite ergonomic. If you like a small knife, absolutely it's there. And as far as the glass breaker / skull crusher, this is probably one of the most ergonomic packages. I always felt that if I needed to break glass, this is such a small knife, I would still have no problem doing it. Now, I haven't used that part, but it's a very nice glass breaker / skull crusher if you need one. All right, so that is this. I give it a C, and that's that one. All right, the next one here is the Genesis size. So this is actually the original size that Greg had dreamt about or designed the Praetorian, but it was the latest to be released. So he released the full size and then the Ti, and then he released the Micro, then he released this size. Now I actually like this size. This size is a very good size. And this knife got quite a bit of carry. Again, this was a Plaza Cutlery edition knife. This one is still under warranty. I have had no issues. I will tell you though, well, let's just go down the list here. This 3V is awesome, absolutely awesome. Probably one of my favorite steels. It is a little bit harder to sharpen for sure, but boy, does it keep an edge better than any other steel. And believe it or not, I've had some issues with the D2, and I'll talk about the Viper. The Micro I didn't have any issues with because it had a PVD coating, I'm guessing, so it could be rusting through it. I just don't see it. But out of all these knives, I haven't had any real issues, but we'll talk about the Viper. But this one really didn't give me too many issues that on the internet it said that it could. So I think this is actually one of the better steels. So if you're asking me if I were building a knife from scratch, what steel I would go with, if you're going to use it and you want to cut things and not have to sharpen your knife that often, I would get the 3V. And you can just tell after I sharpened it, it took the best edge and it kept the edge for the longest period of time. And I haven't had the issues with chipping. I know that it's a very brittle steel, so I know you can chip the steel, but I haven't had those issues. Okay, so let's talk about the action. When I purchased this knife, it had the worst action of all the Medfords. I mean, it was awful. I mean, it was it was terrible. And now, I wouldn't say it drops free, but it's smooth as glass, and anybody in the world would be absolutely happy with this action. It's a beautiful action. It makes a beautiful, nice sound when you open it, and it will, let me see if I can't do it on camera without cutting myself, it will drop free with a hard shake. So if you're into that sort of thing, it feels like a very, very well-built, very smooth knife. This particular one, the ergonomics, I will tell you that this knife has convinced me that I do not like copper. There are two reasons for that. The first one is the symmetry just drives me nuts. It's got a little bit thicker of a copper scale than the titanium, and that's probably because you can't make the titanium on the other side of the lock side to be that thick, or you would ruin the mechanics of the knife. But while it looks beautiful and it patinaed amazing, it's just too heavy. I mean, and I know you guys are gonna say, well, you carry a Medford. It's just not balanced is the word I would use. Now I have a bunch of flashlights as well, and for whatever reason, I just do not prefer the copper. They tend to be a little bit heavier, and just the makeup, and it's just the balance. And while the Micra Praetorian carries very well, this one does not. So this clip, you put it in your pocket, and usually I don't feel it. Nothing's You know, nothing bothers me about heavy knives. I actually carry heavier knives, but for whatever reason, the balance of the copper I felt was a little bit of a negative point on this particular knife. Okay, so the usefulness of this knife is really probably the best in the collection. When I need to cut something, this is the knife I go to. I'm not worried about dulling it. I carry it with me, and I wouldn't hesitate cutting anything with it, and the blade is very, very sharp. And the thickness and the ergonomics of this knife is absolutely perfect. It's not too big, it's not too small. If you're gonna buy one Medford and only one, this is a fantastic choice. I would just tell you that I know that the copper editions were only for Plaza Cutlery, but I would say this is probably more of a collectible knife, and I probably should have got something with G10 if I wanted to judge it a little bit more fairly as far as usefulness. But I do enjoy carrying this every now and then. I still love it, and when I have projects in the garage, this is probably the knife that I grab more than any other knives in my entire knife collection. So I would give this guy a solid B, and that is just because of what I consider a little bit of an imbalance from the scale. So I realized that that wouldn't affect all the Genesis out there. All right. This knife I actually carry more than I use. So this one comes to work with me. This one comes out with me. Beautiful knife. This was one of my absolute favorite knives in my entire collection. So I can't say enough how much I really, really enjoy this knife. I love the look of it. Even the backside is not Mokutai, but it's growing on me. I really love the reflectiveness of the blade, and this is just one of my favorite knives out there. Okay, so let's talk about warranty. Of course, I've never popped this thing open, so this thing is still 100% under warranty. It has had absolutely no issues besides the original. When it was shipped to me, it was shipped without an edge, but again, that was just because I was putting a lot of pressure on Jeff, and he might have done me a favor to skip a step, and I put my own edge on it, and it was amazing. That is probably, quite frankly, a better edge than Medford has put on any of their knives, with no offense to the sharpeners up there, but this really took a nice edge, especially for S35VN, which in my reading and research wasn't supposed to take just such a nice edge, but the hollow is so beautiful. I mean, just so beautiful. They've done such a great job with the hollow grind that it's so thin down at the end. I mean, this thing will you know, razor, slice, whatever you want to cut. So as far as ergonomics, or excuse me, usefulness, 100% useful. Now, I don't go out and I don't take this one into the garage, and I don't try to cut things that would scratch up the blade, so it is babied just a little bit, but it's performed very well. The ergonomics, again, are perfect. I actually think that this is a very, very well balanced knife, and it's big. It goes in my pocket, and Greg's done a great job because this goes in my pocket with keys, and it kind of has a matte finish, not a reflective finish. So you see some scratching here, a little bit, but not much. But really, you couldn't tell at all. I mean, this thing has held up extremely well for a Mokutai user. Extremely well. I use a couple different Mokutai knives, and usually Mokutai gets crushed, especially if it has a shiny finish to it. But this one is holding up extremely well, and I absolutely love it. So this guy is going to take a full A. As far as the action goes, it has picture perfect. It has done exactly what Greg said that they would do. It was a little bit stiff when I got it, and now it's absolutely, I wouldn't say drop free, but yeah, you can just shake it closed there. Hard shake. This is not like a Grimsmo or anything like that, but you know, you can shake them closed. Smooth as glass. This one is one of the premier examples. This is probably one of the best knives that Medford has built. Fantastic knife. It is a friends and family, so it has the thinner blade, but if you're buying just a regular Praetorian, this is the blade you're going to get. Very useful blade. Haven't had any issues. Can cut anything you want with it. Perfect knife. Okay, this is my Praetorian Ti. And this knife actually I carried a ton. So this one I had for about a year before I got the friends and family. So it did most of its use in that time. The friends and family actually gets used a little bit more than this one does now. But when I've got, like I said, garage jobs or kitchen jobs or other jobs that I don't want to scratch up the Micra Ti, this one gets the call. It's an extremely fantastic knife. Again, I've weighed this once upon a time, and it might be, 12, 13 ounces, something like that. But this is really one of the better pocket clips. When you carry this knife, and a buddy of mine did say that he's got issues with literally the knife pulling his pants down because he doesn't wear a belt. Can't really help you there. That just doesn't happen for me. I mean, I wear this with basketball shorts. It's no problem. The only real negative I have about this clip is that these will poke you every so often, these two prongs here. But that's just, I guess, the byproduct of having the logo on the clip. So this knife has actually had issues. It was one of my first knives that I had, and it's not a bad issue. It was sent back. This knife is still under warranty. Because it developed a little bit of lash, and it doesn't have any now, but after the break-in process, first thing I noticed is it just dropped free. And this is probably my most free dropping knife now, but I mean, it was looser than that. So if you have a Medford that just drops on itself like a Grimsmo, more than likely it's out of spec. So I went like this, and I gave it, ever so slightly. I've never really had a Medford had any sort of wiggle in the pivot at all, except for this particular one. When it finally broke in, it seemed a little loose to me, and it probably 9 times out of 10 would have passed quality control for any other company, but I decided to send it back. And plus, I had Medford sharpen it. I was having issues with sharpening such a thick tip. Now, this is my edge now on it. I've used it so much since then, I put my own edge back on it. But just know that if you have a wicked edge or whatever the fixed angle devices are out there now, I had a heck of a time trying to get this on there, just because of how thick the blade was, one, and then you can see how much, even at the widest angle, how much bevel that I had to give it just to get that thing at something like 30 degrees or something like that. It was pretty crazy, but it's sharp. I mean, I got it sharp now. This tip will cut paper now, which is pretty impressive for such a thick blade. So I would say this knife has probably one of the best actions out there. I can always flick it open. Again, it has one of the nicest actions. And if you like loose actions, this one, I can give this to all the guys who like just playing with knives all day, all night. This will be an example of a Medford that will entertain the hell out of them, just flicking it open and closed, especially with the feeling of just such a heavy knife with such a heavy blade. It's just an amazing, fun knife to flick for sure. As far as the ergonomics go, again, I had no problem with this one whatsoever. I actually preferred the Ti. There were some issues with usefulness as far as like getting it into an Amazon box, especially if they packed the tape pretty tight. I mean, it doesn't just slide in there and go. I mean, you had to get it in there and cut some tape and then move it forward. So there were some issues with usefulness, just being how thick the blade was. But as far as ergonomics go, it's still one of the absolute best feeling knives you're going to have in your hand, and just the weight of it makes you feel like there's no other knife out there that gives you kind of that really nice heavy duty feeling. And if I ever had to break glass, I mean, I have no doubt I could break some very serious glass with this knife. So I would give this knife a solid B. I mean, maybe even an A, but I'd say a solid B. Okay, and the last knife I'm going to talk about is the Viper. This knife is not under warranty. I have had a few issues with this knife. Some were my fault and some were not. So first of all, when I got this knife, the action was awful, just like every other Viper I've handled. And I sat there and played with it, you know, left and right and trying to really break it in. Because it's a flipper, you want to have fun with it. It did break in. This has a sweet action on it now, but not before I lost the detent ball. And I decided I was going to try to fix it. And then once I took a tool to it, I was going to pull it apart and get the action down myself, which actually really helped. So once I popped the detent ball out, I sent it back because I had lost the detent ball. But one of the things is that now the knife wasn't under warranty. There was nothing really holding me back to say, okay. So then I popped open the knife and I polished the washers, and they really helped a ton. I mean, this thing has a very, very beautiful action. I know that these are not in production anymore, so it's not a big deal, but I know that Greg probably wanted you to have that done naturally over time, but, you know, a lot of people are impatient. I'm not the most patient guy, but this action is amazing. Let me see if I can't do it softly and still get it. Well, the detent's not great on it still, but it's so smooth and it's got pretty good geometry. So when this smoothed out in there, everything is pretty good. I mean, I generally prefer snappier detents, but this knife is really, really nice. So I would say that this particular knife for a flipper and it being on washers is not as good as the new stuff coming out of Russia. I know that there's the Culture Tech stuff coming out of Russia. I know there was a SNEC from the Custom Knife Factory. I wouldn't say it's that good, but it certainly has that feel, that just like Cadillac door feel to it. It really, really feels quite nice. It's not going to drop on you, so you can put it in the, you know, but if you give it a wiggle, it'll come down. So this knife is broken in great. When I compare this knife to my two other Vipers that I have, it's night and day. The Vipers need to be broken in, no doubt. If you bought a Viper for the money you paid for them and you got it out of the box, you really had to trust Medford because they were really crappy, all three of them. And this one broke in the best because I used it the most. And it's a very nice flipper now. It really is. It's very nice. I don't misfire it at all, and it just has a very different and unique feel compared to everything else in my collection. But with kind of the issues I've had with this knife, I would give it a C. And this pocket clip, now this is the only one I have with this pocket clip, but it's awful. It comes to a certain point here, and all the weight's down here, so it acts like a pendulum in your pocket, especially that I wear like looser clothes, basketball clothes. So for ergonomics, I give this like a D. I don't mind carrying a big knife. In fact, I carry my Gigantes, and it has the same pocket clip, but for whatever reason, it does not have the same like hanging feel to it that this one has. So this one, when I originally got it, it came with me everywhere because I just love the design so much. But then I do live in California, and every time I pulled this thing out to kind of thread off something, people did kind of look at it a little bit funny. And at the end of the day, with the pocket clip kind of being what it is, it really does most of its work now just around the house, like I said, in the garage, things like that. Okay, so another couple of interesting things about the Viper. The first thing I will tell you is that this is a D2 blade, and just the geometry of the blade made it very, very easy to sharpen. I actually sharpened this on a wicked edge, so if you have a fixtured system, just the nature of the Wharncliffe and the wonderful hollow that they put on it, you're going to get great results. I got great results. Didn't have any issues rounding the tip. I didn't have any issues with anything while I was sharpening it, and it sharpened out beautifully, and it is still razor sharp. And actually, it's a very useful knife. You can cut boxes, you can cut just about anything. You just have to learn how to control the tip that's just going to be a little bit farther away than you're used to. This knife also, though, was the only knife that had any D2 issues. Now, you probably cannot see it. Let me see if I can get a flashlight here. And it's not going to work. Okay. So it had a little bit of, I wouldn't say rusting at all, but discoloration right here. So it's funny because all of this part of the knife had no rust, no nothing, but right in the finger choil you can see that's definitely discoloration. I don't know if I would go so far as to call it rust, but something's going on there. Not sure if they don't treat that or whatever it is or how that's working, but I've seen no rust develop on any of my Medfords except for some discoloration right there on the Viper. So that's just something to think about. Again, I do live in a pretty humid area, and this knife sees a lot of time in the garage, and maybe I use it with wet hands and I don't treat it as well as I probably should. So that is something to consider, but this is the only knife that has had any sort of issues that people would expect with D2, and that's just right in here. But other than that, it is a beautiful and very functional knife. We'll line them back up. I'll kind of give you my final take here. And I hope this is helpful and answers questions. Okay, so I've opened these two. These two I've opened. These three are still under warranty, and I can tell you that while Greg does not want you to open them, and I know he's changed the pivot, so it's even harder, they are very simple, well-designed, well-built knives. So I will say that if you do decide to take the plunge and void your warranty and pop it open, you'll be impressed. No corners were cut on them. From the inside and out, they are very, very solid tools, and they are very, very solid knives. The styling, that's going to be something that you have to decide. Now, if you're watching these videos and you're considering a Medford, you already like the styling. You probably like Greg. You probably like his message that he sends out. And I would say they are fantastic knives. And quite frankly, Greg's trying to kill the secondary on these things, and I've seen some of his videos, and he tells you not to buy them used. Out of all the knives I had, they sell pretty well. I mean, they don't sell at a high rate. Some people are worried about secondary prices. I'm not concerned about that, in the sense of, everyone wants to buy a knife, go beat it up, and sell it for twice what they paid for. I think they're just being idiots because nothing else works like that. But they're like, oh, I've got a special knife. But as far as how quickly these sell, if you are priced at market, they are going to sell quick. So I actually sold a couple of these knives, as I got a bunch of these, and a couple of them didn't fit my collection, and man, they ended up selling very, very quickly. Now, the secondary is not great. You're going to lose money, but that's like everything else. I don't go out and buy a new car and sell it 3 weeks later and try to make money off it. That just wouldn't be the smart thing to do. But as far as these knives go, I still think that they're fantastic knives. I think that I'm using these for what they are designed and what the purpose is, and the weight and the design and the thickness has not been an issue at all. Again, I kind of prefer that. I kind of prefer heavier knives, but this is my current and foreseeable rotation of Medford knives. So I hope you guys found this video to be at least entertaining, but hopefully somewhat informative, and I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks a lot.